that's such a key aspect to changing society, is to get people to raise some sort of awareness about how the law works and how that's a major part of controlling us. You know, even the whole thing of going into a courtroom and, you know, the exchanges, the verbal exchanges that you make with a judge are massive in terms of, you know, them controlling you.
But there's really a way to break through all that. It's really a consciousness thing that you got to understand that they're playing a play and they're playing person. There are a bunch of actors in a
courtroom. Yeah.
Well, it's not even a court; it's a stage.
No, I meant in terms of, like, you know, I was thinking things like a playing court. You know, like playing a game of tennis.
Yeah.
Courtroom. Yeah. Game. It's a game.
They even dress up for the roles.
They wear dresses.
Yeah, they wear dresses. They have props with a gavel. You know, it's a whole production.
All you have to do is in the courtroom. You say, "I own this courtroom because I'm the only one representing a living being." Are you all people gonna, you know, if they're going to represent a living person, then they have to take off the robes and the you know, all that other stuff, and then play a reality check game. But
yeah, that's that Carl Lentz stuff.
The thing is, though, I this is something I don't know anything about. I'm completely clueless when it comes to the law and everything, and it's something I really want to learn more about, because I do feel that it's a really major part of what's controlling society.
Yeah, you don't have any rights.
It's the lack of understanding.
You have to. The first thing you have to understand is you don't have any rights when you have a lawyer. You have to go in there and do it yourself and speak as a man for yourself and invoke your own rights, and even bring in a counterclaim.
So the minute you have a lawyer, or in my case a solicitor,
right,
you basically, that's the beginning of the end. You've given away all your rights.
Because he can't claim a right for you. You have to do that yourself. And that's the trick. And then you have these two buddies that are freaking arguing between themselves, you know, and the longer they argue, the more money they make.
Exactly. Well, they make you dishonorable as soon as they argue, because argument is dishonorable. You got to be honorable. No, you have really 4 choices to respond to anyone in this world, and because you are one with them, and that's what it means to be honorable. It means to know that you are one with everything. You're a gentleman, and so there's only 4 responses that are possible, and two of which responses are honorable, and the other 2 are dishonorable. And the first response that you can make that is dishonorable would be to not respond, to just not say anything. So that's when they say, you know, you have the right to remain silent. Well, you're dishonorable when you're silent. And the second response is to reject their whatever they say, to outright reject it, and that's through an argument. And so that would be considered dishonorable. And so the only 2 responses that are honorable is this, and what that is to either accept their claim, or, like you said before, make a counterclaim. And that's it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. It's a conditional response. So you can respond, but then you apply a condition to it that's either a question or and actually responding with questions to seek clarity.
So if they ask you, obviously the obvious thing, if they ask you to sort of state your name and date of birth or whatever, how would you respond to that? Sorry if that sounds like a bit of a thick question. What do you respond with a question back? Do you?
Well, yeah, it's very simple. This is what you. Well, no, you don't. You just ask them. Yeah, exactly. You have a question. If they say, state your name. What's your name? You just say, what name would you like me to state?
Okay.
And then,
right.
And they have to say, you know, well, state your legal name. We'll say, what is a legal name?
I see, right.
It's you. If you don't know what they're talking about, you ask the questions. Define it. You know, define what you're talking about. So basically, I could be called all kinds of things. You know, from my kids or dad, from my wife.
Yeah.
You know, my
what do you mean? Yeah.
It's honey. You know, it's what name would you like me? Because I'm called by like 50 different names, right? Well, everybody says, they might say, well, the prosecutor might say, well, you know what he's asking. And
no, I don't.
I'm not a mind reader. Exactly. You like every time they get aggressive with you, it's not an argument to state facts and ask questions. That's
right.
not.
Yeah.
So it's really just all about being very innocent, like a child. You know, you have to go into it like a child. Because the more you try to figure it out, the more you're into the web, and the further away from the truth that you are. And the more that just a simple, you're a woman, you're born in this land, and if they don't believe you that you're a woman, well, you know, you say like it's an order. You know, if you want me to provide you proof, then I'm gonna write an order just like you know, a waitress writes out an order for your cheeseburger, right? They want some proof, so it costs you something. It's your personal property that they want proof of, and that's your blood. And your blood is your identification, because no one on earth has the same blood that you have, because it'll have receptors that are only you. And the only way, and we know this because I can take your blood and put it into someone. Well, blood is different. If it would have to be a tissue like an organ. Blood can actually combine with certain people who got O negative or whatever, but the actual cells themselves in tissue have identification to the person, and it will reject. Anybody will reject unless they remove all the receptors from. You don't even need a driver's license. You don't need a passport. You don't need shit. And if they request an identification, it's an order. They're gonna have to pay for it because it's your property, and it's your blood. You know, say you prick my finger, and I'll put my thumbprint on a piece of paper. And my thumbprint will, by the way, every black and white thing that's on there is death. So if it's written in, if you ever write anything, write it in red ink, because that represents blood. And if you do a thumbprint on the paper, then that means that you're a living man, and you trump all corporation persona. And now when they said a person has equal rights to every other person, citizen, whatever, what they really meant is that a corporation has equal rights as a slave, as someone that's in servitude, that's voluntary servitude. And what it means to be in voluntary servitude is to claim that you have this name, that you're a citizen, that you're protected by the state. And you might say, they might question you in your citizenship. They might say, "Are you a person?" You know, and you might say, "No, I'm not a person. I'm not a." Because if you look in the dictionary, there's a definition for person, and there's 4 different dictionaries, especially if you got like a college version that deals with legal stuff, because law has a definition for every single word that's uttered in the legal system, unless you remove yourself from the political jurisdiction. And that's the key. You just basically have to simply say, prove that you have political jurisdiction over me, because corporations don't have political jurisdiction over the people. And if you look at in the United States, they don't lie to you. It's an absolute fact that we the people have the posterity of the land, and that means that we are here. The land and all the resources are here to benefit us. But who is us? It's the people. If you look in the Constitution, there's not one people in the Constitution. They're all persons, and they're all citizens. So where do you go from there? People are the ruling class, and they rule over the servitude class. And once you get to the point where, why did they do this? Why did they create this system like this? It's disgusting. You know, we've got slaves. Well, the fact is that they're hoping that you'll get smart at some point in your life. But what they do now is they train, because they need ditch diggers, so they just train people to be ditch diggers. Not one person is asking the most basic questions. I'm a living being. Why is it that these systems are trumping who and what I am? Because they've been taught out of that in school. For 18 years, it's like playing the guitar. If you play for 5 years, you're going to be pretty good at playing the guitar. If you go to school for 5 years, you're going to be pretty good at thinking government rhetoric, which is all rhetoric. It's not anything to do with being a living person, because they don't teach you anything. Like, they don't teach you how to grow food. They don't teach you how to balance your checkbook. They don't teach you how to how to manage your life, how to manage your love, how to manage the stress. They don't teach you anything about a living thing. But if you were like Daniel, you said that story, and it was a beautiful story, the story of your grandmother, and that is what we're missing in society. This and they knew this, man. The Jesuit priests and all this from the very beginning. I mean, all law is from biblical knowledge, and whether you believe in God and Jesus and all that, it doesn't matter, because law recognizes God as this. It's if you go back in antiquities, my grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, so on, all the way 100,000 years ago, whatever, at some point we were created. And whether we crawled out of the dirt or whatever, our creator is God, and that God is recognized in law. But it's not recognized in law in the sense that you know it. It's just referred to and understood. And if you the more you read like Thomas Paine and all these different fellows that wrote, I mean, these guys were anarchists, you know, and they were self-governed, and they were the ones that put the whole system in check. I mean, it would be a lot worse than it is now if these guys weren't around back then. We're the modern Thomas Paines, you know, and what we need to do is spread the most basic messages that the most powerful thing that you have is your life. And your life trumps all things, and you can walk into any courtroom and own the courtroom because you're the only person representing a living being. And every other person who's living is representing a corporation, which is a corpse. The United States government is a corporation. Yeah. The UK Parliament, that's a corporation. They're all offices, seats of office, which are all corporations, corporates. Yeah, and that means death. Everything's written in black and white. Not one of them writes in a red ink. Not one of them represents a living being. It's all a faction of the mind. And when you represent life, that is now. That trumps antiquity. That trumps dead kings. That trumps offices of the state and everything else. But if you start spewing that stuff, see, that's the thing about being a man is that you're vulnerable and you can be killed. And so you don't have protections of the state if you're a man. You have to protect yourself, and that's why, you know, rich people, they create this elaborate thing so that we don't attack them. You see, that we're all hoodwinked, and we all think that we're enslaved. We're not enslaved. We have just as much right to breathe and drink water and hunt and eat as anything on this earth. We have the prosperity of the land. The land is our, and so we're responsible for the land, right? We live here, so we need to make a place that's good for us. And these people are the only people that understand that. The masses don't understand it, and it's our job to tell the masses this. And we've got to figure out a way that they can understand it. And that's why I'm interested in mind control, not to control someone's mind, but to take their mind over for a second, and say, look at life this way for a second. And once they can see that, in a way that's not adversarial, one that's not, you know, that's not taking away from who they are as a being. Because once you tell somebody you are the most precious thing in the universe, because you can't be replaced, your repeatlessness, like you could create something that could not only change the world now, but could affect the universe, the people of the future for generations, you know, millions or billions of people, and that is amazing, and you can't take that away from people, and that's more valuable than gold, water, any other resource that's on Earth, because those resources are renewable. Exactly. You can get those resources again. You can melt gold back down. You can renew water. You can renew soil. All these things, but you can't renew a human life, and that's why human life is the most potent of energy and say. And that's why when you speak, it should be recognized as powerful, and it is. And when you're in a court system, they recognize your voice as powerful. And when you say, "I am a citizen," they take your voice. See the laws in the United States say a judge cannot inform you of the law. They'll be disbarred. The bailiff will arrest them on site because they'll have broken their own law. They cannot tell you what the law is, and it's up to you. And just like you said, be damn smart about how your attorneys are arguing for you, and they basically dishonor you. You know, that whole trick is that we don't have the power, so we got to give all of our power away to these people. But those people don't give a fuck about us, and all we are to them is cash crop, because now we've become a character in a play, something that can be played.
So it's just a case of, like, with law, it's just a case of them trying to get you to play their game with a series of tricks.
Precisely.
In terms of who you are, in terms of the name, you could say, well, I didn't choose that. I'm not saying you necessarily get into this line of thought, but this is just my thought, I didn't choose my name. My parents chose that name when I was a baby, when I couldn't speak or do anything. I didn't have a choice in the matter. So I was just a sovereign, sentient being that was born into this reality. On the Earth plane, I didn't choose that name in terms of the name thing that we were talking about. So it's just a case of them trying to get you to play their game and agree with what they want you to agree with, and then once you agree with them, they've got you, right? Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, exactly. But Nikki, yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. But once you start to understand this, once you start to understand how the brain works and how children develop, like children are in the theta stage until their age of 12, and meaning everything that they learn is being programmed into them. So not only is that the name that your parents called you by, but they programmed you into you. So it's like, if I say that this is my name, that I repeat this name over and over again, it's because it's been programmed by someone else. And I can prove that because children are programmed through the theta wave in their brain. Children cannot produce alpha waves until they reach around puberty. And that's when they begin cranking on the alpha waves, and that's why I'm
guessing why they call it the formative years of the ages 2 to 7 of the formative years. And I think there was I can't remember his name, some politician suggesting that children start going to school at 2 years old.
Well, that's why the state wants your children.
UK, they want people to go to school at the age of 2 now. Well, this is what they're proposing. Because the ages 2 to 7 are the formative years. I'm guessing that's what you're talking about. That's an age period where those programs or belief systems are kind of cemented into the person.
Precisely.
Belief system.
Those programs in the first formative years of your life are the hardest to deprogram in an adult. Yeah. And usually you're like 40 or 50 before you can deprogram those things, before you're actually even aware of those things as a human being. And that's why they don't care, because once you get that age, it's like, well, you don't have the same power that you did when you were 20 or 30, right? So it doesn't matter, if people wake up when they're 45, 50 years old. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of people are just kind of tired by then. Even people who are fairly conscious, are quite conscious and aware. Even the certain people that are conscious and aware is like, well, I mean, there's people that are conscious and aware of what's going on, but choose not to do anything about it. They choose not to be proactive in terms of changing anything because they kind of decide that, oh, well, I'm okay, I've got this house, I'm not too bad, I've paid off a few of my debts. I mean, it depends on their circumstance, obviously. It depends on the situation in terms of what they do, but some people are conscious, yet they choose not to do anything on the basis that it doesn't really matter to them anymore. So yeah, I would totally agree with that, in the sense that on a general scale, most people by that age are kind of not really much of a threat to the control system, because they're just like, well, it's too late now. Now that you've got to the age where you kind of understand and have worked it all out, you don't really have the passion or the motivation or the will to do anything about it.
So the way I see it at this point, it's going to be up to the people that are waking up and understand that they have power, and that their power is very loud because they're living men and women of the land, and we don't have to prove to any state who we are. And the land is, and the government and the corporations are all for our posterity, not for theirs, because we are the people. But we are ultimately responsible for our own protection. And here's the thing: that's why they've got us separated out, and we can't fight. We can't fight that system on our own. If I go into a courtroom and I start spouting these things, I may be able to trump the law, but at some point somebody's going to silence me. Do you understand? So we have to protect each other and create networks. There's all these different apps you can use. There's clothing now that has video and audio that you can stream to cloud and have your friends have access, encryption accesses. We need to start. I mean, imagine if you were being pulled over by a police officer in your car, and you texted your buddies, and you had like 10 buddies show up, and they're all armed, and they show up, right? And you tell the police officer, you need to carry on or get the magistrate, because I really don't have time for you. I'm a living man, and you're a person, and you're scaring me with your sidearm, asking me questions that you don't need to be asking me. And what would happen if we had our own group of people? Because really the only thing that's happening is that this group of people, this elite people, that we the people, the Just Us group, has created this system so that they can protect themselves, because they know if we all wake up, oh man, there's going to be hell to pay, and so they're protecting themselves. They're terrified, and one way we can relieve that is we can protect ourselves. We can rise up to protect ourselves, but we can also somehow include this evil into our love and overcome it without, off with their heads.
Yeah,